There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Matthew. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store.
And so they keep trudging through this crowd, Jesus and Jairus and his disciples. And then there's this woman who really shouldn't be there, who is also in the crowd. The reason she shouldn't have been there is because she's ceremonially unclean, which is telling us that she has a physical problem. And she's had this problem for 12 years, which happens to be the same age as Jairus' daughter. And it calls her physical problem a flow of blood. So this is not a normal menstruation, because what it is her menstruation, it never stops. And in the law, it says that any menstruation from a woman makes that woman ceremonially unclean for the whole time of that menstruation period. And so this woman, she wasn't allowed to join into any of the regular social functions. And although by her physical appearance you couldn't tell, she had to live outside of society for these 12 years. And she couldn't be around people. Because if anybody touched her, the law said that that person would be made ceremonially unclean until the next day. In fact, they couldn't even touch anything that she's touched, because that would also make them unclean. And so this woman, she hasn't been able to go to the temple or to go to the synagogue or to her marketplace or to join into any of the religious feasts, which were the Jewish holidays. And she's broke. She doesn't have any money anymore because she spent it all on doctors. And the only thing the doctors could do for her is to take her money. And this woman, she's never seen Jesus before. She's only heard of him. And she keeps telling herself over and over in her head, if I can only touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. And she believed what she was telling herself, to the point where she had talked herself into actually doing it, and she was willing to try it. And even though this seems almost like it's kind of a superstitious belief, and what is talking about the hem of his garment, Jews, they had tassels, and they had 4 tassels on the corners of their robes. And all Jewish men, they had these tassels on their robes to remind them that they were God's people, that they were his chosen people. And they were all the color of hyacinth blue, which is kind of like a periwinkle blue. And so here we see that Jesus, he's just dressed like any other Jewish man. He just wears regular clothes. And she knew that it would be wrong for her to touch him, because she knew that that would make him unclean. And she probably didn't believe that a man so holy would want to touch her, because nobody did, because she was treated much like a leper was treated. And so here she is, and now she's sneaking through this crowd, and she's bumping into people, and people are bumping into her. And she knew that everyone she touched was made unclean, even though the people she touched never knew that they were unclean. And she probably felt very badly about it. But she wants to keep this very private because her condition is embarrassing. But this is her chance to get in there, to touch that hem of his clothes, and then to get out of there as quickly as she can. And so she does it, and she touches him. And she feels the power of God from Jesus flowing through her as the healing starts to occur. And we're told immediately that her flow of blood, it dried up. And then she tries to get herself lost into the crowd. But Jesus, he knew she was healed because he felt it too, because that healing was given to her from him. But this woman, she's trying to get away because she thinks she stole the healing. And Jesus, he didn't want her to go away with that guilt and to always have that feeling that she stole a healing from God, because this healing God wanted to give to her. And so Jesus here, he just stops everything and he says, who touched my clothes? Which sounds really quite odd when you think about that. Who touched my clothes? And at least the disciples, they thought it was very odd, because they called Jesus out on that and they say, you see the multitude thronging you, and you say, who touched me? And now here we just have to stop. And we just have to take a minute and we just need to think, what was Jairus thinking, this leader of the synagogue? What was he thinking in this particular moment? Because he's standing there and he has all this anxiety because he's trying to rush Jesus off and to get him to his home to heal his daughter before she dies. And Jairus, he probably wasn't bold enough to say it out loud because he can't afford to offend Jesus, because now Jesus is his only hope. But if Jesus is your only hope, well, then that's the right place to have your hope. And so there's nothing that Jairus can do about this. He can't hurry Jesus up, and he's just going to have to wait until Jesus is done. And he still knows right here that they're going to have to fight through the crowd to get to his house. And we all know what this feels like. We know what it feels like to be late for something and then to be stuck in traffic because of road construction or because of an accident. And the only thing that's keeping you from getting to your destination is just that man over there with a flag or a stop sign. And he's keeping you from being where you need to be. And there's nothing you can do about it. And so Jesus here, he looks into the crowd and he sees her. And he doesn't point her out. He lets her come to him because he gives her the opportunity to come and to confess. And she does this, and she falls down at his feet, and she tells him the whole truth. And then here, Jesus, he does the most wonderful thing. He calls her daughter, and no one has called this woman daughter for a long time. And daughter is a very intimate term, and we never hear of Jesus ever calling anybody else daughter. And so this shows us how much Jesus loved her, though he had just met her. And Jesus tells her that it was her faith that healed her. And so he doesn't let her go on believing it's just her superstitious belief that it was about his hem that healed her. But even though her reasoning wasn't perfect, it was her faith in Jesus that Jesus could heal her, and that it's not because of the touching of the tassel, but her faith was placed in the person of Jesus. So immediately after this, we read, if we were reading Mark's gospel, it tells us that some of the people, well, they came from Jairus' house and they came to him into the crowd. So the same spot, they come to the crowd and then they tell Jairus, they say, your daughter's dead. You don't need to trouble the teacher any longer. And so if you can imagine Jairus' frustration, he could be thinking, well, maybe if Jesus hadn't delayed so long, we may have made it on time. But Jesus, he turns to him and he reassures him and he says, do not be afraid, only believe. And what we need to learn here is to believe Jesus' word and to believe his promises, no matter what our circumstances look like, that we can always trust him. And no matter what others say to us, no matter the things that we've heard or how bad things look, or even how we feel, that we can trust Jesus. And Jairus here, he doesn't take their advice because he sees that Jesus is working and he's decided here to believe Jesus. And so they continue on in faith. And then they finally get home. And when they get to the house is already in the middle of a funeral service. Because in Israel, when a person dies, they bury that person on the very same day. And so here we read about these flute players and the noisy wailers. And what these people were, they were professional mourners. And in Israel, even the very poorest families, they had to hire professional mourners. And there would never be any fewer than 2 flute players and 1 wailing woman. These people, because they were professionals and they say that she's dead, they knew death because that's all they did. They were the funeral directors. And the kind of wailing that they were doing out there, the screaming and the crying, this was not a sincere display of sorrow. And the reason you can tell that this wasn't sincere is how quickly they switched from crying and wailing to ridiculing and mocking Jesus. And so now Jesus, he puts those professional mourners out of the house because they're all scoffers. And scoffers are enemies to those people who are trying to believe God. Scoffers are always the enemies of faith. And I personally hate praying in a mixed group of believers and non-believers, especially for the things that take faith, the things like a healing or deliverance. And in these kind of cases, I only like to pray with genuine believers. And I'm not saying that they have to be old believers or mature believers, but they have to be real believers, because I know that God hears real believers' prayers, but he doesn't hear the prayers of scoffers. And there's a lot of people who call themselves Christians, but if they're not of the born again type, and they think of Jesus as somebody far off, as not of somebody that's actually living in their heart, I kind of have a lot of trouble with their prayers too. And I've had many times where I'm praying for something serious, and I know I'm praying, and people will look at me strangely, and they'll look at me because I'm praying for something and believing it's going to happen, and they'll say, well, we're all praying. And I'm just thinking, yeah, but does God hear your prayers? So the only people that he allows in this room is the mom and the dad, and then Peter, James, and John. He only lets in believers. And this isn't a big production. There's no big, great ritual, and Jesus doesn't wave his hands around and say some special type magicish kind of words. He just takes her hand, and it says in our text, it says, little girl, I say to you, arise. But literally in the Aramaic, he's saying, little lamb, wake up. And I love stories like this because Jesus, he doesn't go around healing every dead little girl. And Jesus here, he didn't do it for the little girl. In fact, this is the first time Jesus has ever done this for anybody in the scriptures. And so this is not common. But the reason that I love this is because what I think Jesus is doing here is that he's having pity on a father who's so brokenhearted and who only has a little faith in him, just enough faith to ask him to help. And that's why I love this, because I believe Jesus does this exact same thing for me. When I'm brokenhearted over someone I love and I can't do anything about it, and I just go ahead and I ask him with my little faith, and I've seen him do things. And he doesn't do them on the account of the person that I'm praying for, that person deserves it, because that person may not have any faith at all. But I believe Jesus does that because Jesus, he pities me. Because if you look at the story with this little girl, she didn't have any faith at all. She couldn't have any. She was dead. She had no faith. And we'll see Jesus do this 2 more times in the Bible, where he'll have mercy on a widow because her son died in the town of Nain. And then we'll also see it with his dear friend Lazarus. But there will be one day when Jesus will bring us all back from the dead, and he'll do that, and he'll do it permanently.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.